of War and Depression. Joining us now are Avlon and Errol Louis, both CNN contributors and co-authors of Deadline Artists. Here's the book right here. Deadline Artists, America's Greatest Newspaper Columns. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Before we talk about the book, we have to talk about class warfare in America because it's heating up again. Exactly. As you know, President Obama is going to give this speech at 10:30 Eastern Time, and he's going to talk about the Buffett rule, raising taxes on millionaires. Already, Republicans are fighting back. This from Senator Lindsey Graham yesterday. Listen.
When you pick one area of the economy and you say we're going to tax those people because most people are not those people, that's class warfare.
Okay, so is it class warfare or is it sharing the burden?
I think, you know, the bumper sticker of class warfare now gets trotted out for almost anything. We're trying to deal with the deficit and the debt. If you take that seriously, it means everyone's got to get a little bit. We have a problem in this country between a rising gap between the rich and poor. Not even just the rich poor, the super rich. So I do think that there's some political argument to be made for saying, look, let's take folks who have a net income of $1 million a year and make sure that they pay their fair share. And we're talking about not, you know, an additional amount, but just getting it back to maybe those Clinton-era levels. That said, this is the start of a negotiation. So everyone's got to take a deep breath and realize that both sides are polarized. They're staking out positions that satisfy their base. The question is, will they be able to meet in the middle?
Yeah, but Errol, the president can't really negotiate on tax hikes. All these Republicans signed these anti-tax hike pledges.
Yeah, and this is intended, among other things, to show how ridiculous it is to make that kind of a pledge before you've seen any of the realities of what we're going to have to do. Fighting two wars, trying to get prosperity back, trying to start or stop a depression from happening. So when the Republicans say we're never going to raise any taxes on anyone, no matter how wealthy, no matter how unjustified the tax burden, no matter how great the needs are, we've got $1 trillion infrastructure problem, we've got a bunch of bridges falling down.
John Boehner came out and said, hey, I'm for tax reform and maybe closing some of those tax loopholes, so he's not totally opposed to, you know, kind of like fooling around with taxes. But tax hikes, no.
Well, but then it's a definition of what's tax hikes. That's where this whole fight's going to be. Because remember the last round we had when Boehner and Obama were working on a grand bargain, $4 trillion grand bargain. It got derailed because some folks on the far right said closing loopholes. Even if you lower rates but close loopholes to increase revenue, which is what Bull Simpson had proposed, that would be called a tax hike by some of these folks who are taking the pledge. That becomes a fundamental problem just in terms of governing. If you want to deal with the deficit and the debt, if you can't lower rates and close loopholes to raise revenues, then you got very little room to maneuver on a tax reform. I still think that's where this is going to come. 35 senators signed on to a statement saying that they hope the super committee goes bigger than 1.5. It's got to happen with entitlement reform and tax reform. And even the president's plan has $500 billion in entitlement reform.
It's interesting you say that because the president supposedly is going to say this morning, hey, I'm not going to agree to anything with Medicare and Medicaid unless you consider tax hikes. And I think he has to do that because I don't know if you read this. This was in the Miami paper, I think Sunday. Let me find it. So Congressional Black Caucus Chairman Emanuel Cleaver told the Miami Herald, quote, if former President Bill Clinton had been in the White House and had failed to address this problem with unemployment among African Americans, we would probably be marching on the White House. There is a less volatile reaction in the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, because nobody wants to do anything that would empower the people who hate the president. So he's sort of intimating if the president were white, maybe the Congressional Black Caucus would be saying, hey, African-American community, march on the White House because this guy ain't doing anything for you.
In this case, Congressional Black Caucus is a stand-in for the liberal base, the Obama base.
Right.
And is this going to keep them happy? Yes, it might keep them a little less unhappy, frankly. They've wanted to see him get out there and fight the good fight, to be Harry Truman in 1948 and to sort of get out there and say, this is what the other side is doing and it's wrong. And if you want to see things change, stay with me. I will go give them hell. Is Obama going to do that? Well, he's not very good. He's not very credible at his Harry Truman interpretation, but, you know, you never know. He'll get out there and he's going to make the case for what is, in the end, sound economic policy.
So I guess, you know, to sum it up, and then we'll talk about the book, I promise, class warfare might be a good thing for the president.
Class warfare is never a good thing. The question is,
oh,
if anything,
take off your independent hat.
But if anything gets, but right now, if we're in a debate where anything gets
up
labeled,
there, John, and said, look, millionaires have to pay their fair share. But I'm fighting for you, middle class and lower middle class.
That's not class warfare. Right now, we're in an environment where anything gets labeled class warfare, and that itself is an abuse of the term. That itself is just positive polarization. That's just playing to the Republican base.
All right, whatever. I'm just kidding. Let's talk about the book,
Yes,
Deadline
please.
Artists. So why did you guys decide to go through you know, years and years and years of newspapers and pull out, you know, great opinion pieces over the years. I mean,
we started working together at the New York Sun as both as columnists. And this book started the way I think all books should start, where it was the book we wanted to read. You know, when you start out as a columnist, there's no book that collects the best of the past. And we're living at a time where people are writing obituaries for newspapers every day. And yet opinion writing is proliferating online like never before. And what we don't have a sense of, our generation and younger, is maybe the best of the past. Just how good guys were like Breslin and Kempton, H.L. Mencken, Ernie Pyle. So here's a book, the first time all these collected in one book. And I think it can maybe help us to inspire us and help raise our game.
And keep in mind, this was a matter of, as working columnists, needing stuff to steal, basically, or borrow, depending on how you want to look at it. You know, there are only so many sort of stale references to, you know, Seinfeld or the Godfather movies. You know, why not put aside some of that cultural junk food and look for what's really sort of literary journalism, really creative stuff.
So in reading these great opinion pieces, now that everything's moved to the internet, I mean,
you
are the
can't
opinion
find
pieces...
most of what's in there on the internet.
You can't.
You can't find it.
That's one of the things. I mean, the world didn't begin in 1996, but in the world according to the internet, it often did. And all this stuff that was published in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and the subjects we cover are war, politics, sports, humor. The vast majority isn't available on the internet. And that's one of the things that made this process so exciting. It's sort of moldering on microfilm in these libraries, but for the first time, it's really going to be accessible. And that's why this was such a labor of love and a lot of fun to do.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you both for coming in this morning. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. The book is Deadline Artists, America's Greatest Newspaper Columns. There it is. Christine, take it away.
Thanks, guys. All right, mind